This is a new thing, right?
Yeah.
See, if somebody gonna do something about it, see, technology is so high, right?
Right.
So if you shoot somebody, you go to jail forever. So the kids, you don't want to go to jail forever, right? So they got this new thing out there. People sell them all the time. They got this stuff to call, they get blood from somebody with AIDS, and then they shoot you with it.
Oh, so that seems bad.
That's a slow death.
Yeah.
An easy E thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay.
Sup, sobers. So humans make mistakes. Some of them are much more serious than others, obviously. But there are certain times and certain places where mistakes have a seriously lasting impact. You would imagine there'd be intense proofreading and tons of double, triple checking when it comes to special events like birthdays, anniversaries, wedding days, I don't even know, babies' birth certificates, and especially when you consider somebody's tombstone. If we take a closer look at the Godfather's final resting place, you will find a truly underwhelming and lackluster underappreciation for a man who contributed so much to the world of music, but you will also find that there is no mention of the name Eazy-E anywhere to be found on this tombstone. With that in mind, can you honestly believe that the Godfather of Gangster Rap laid beneath a tombstone for nearly 24 years that had the wrong birth year displayed on it? Truly, it's not what one would expect for a legendary icon like Eazy-E, who literally changed the world of rap and hip-hop forever and brought it into the mainstream. This tombstone was one of many indications that made me feel that something was amiss with this unexpected and dang right confusing ending to the Godfather of Gangster Rap. And in true form, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into Eazy-E's story, because with all the recent videos I've done and the allegations being thrown around about celebrities like Aaron Carter, Brittany Murphy, and Kim Porter, they all seem to point to the fact that there is a dark side to the entertainment industry as a whole. And it just makes you wonder, with this story of Eazy-E, how far back does this stuff really go? Well,
let's go. Alcohol.
welcome back to Sobering Stories, you guys, with me, DJ Petrovsky, and I just wanted to let you guys know that I was getting super sick of copyright stuff, and so I decided to just make my own intro music. So let me know what you think about the new intro song, because I made it myself. Order of business number 2. Even though Eazy-E was really popular and his peak of his career was really before my time and a lot of people's times, really, he's one of those artists and one of those icons that's almost impossible to forget. Another thing that's impossible to forget is the Sunnyside app. I truly was trying to forget about this app because one of the biggest complaints that I would have with it is that I would probably just never use it. I would forget that the app was there. I would forget to track my progress. I'd miss a day. I'd be bummed that I missed a day, blah, blah, blah. But this app doesn't let you forget about it. It will text you up like a good friend. It'll check on your drinking. It'll check on your habits. It'll check on what you did for your goals, if you actually met your goals that day. And then if you do, you just text it back. You just say whatever your answer is to the text, and it'll actually update everything in the app for you. So it makes it truly impossible for you to forget about the app, and it makes it even easier for you to keep track of your goals, of your drinking habits, and it makes it even easier for you to cut down or cut back altogether. I wanted to partner with Sunnyside because they truly support what my channel is trying to do, and that is promote sobriety and talk about addiction and just bring the conversation to the table. It's not really that easy to bring the conversation to the table in every situation. Sometimes it's easier to do things on your own, and some people, like myself, knew that they could figure it out on their own. They just had to have the right tools. And with Sunnyside, it's like a little accountability buddy. You keep it in your back pocket, and it's always there to help you maintain and stay on track so that you can achieve a happier, healthier, more sober lifestyle. If you haven't heard of Sunnyside, click that link and check it out. And if you really want to give it a try, if you use that link that I've got in the description, you can actually get a 30-day free trial, and it'll get you a discount if you want to sign up for the yearly membership. I truly think it's worth it, especially if you're looking to cut back or cut out alcohol or whatever your substance of choice is completely. Give Sunnyside a try, click that link, and of course, every time you click that link and start a free trial, it does help your boy out, continue bringing you guys more sobering stories. The only other thing he really did with them was he was slanging on the block in his days before he was in NWA. So it doesn't necessarily make him the best candidate for my channel, because he didn't necessarily struggle with an addiction issue, but he was involved in that world, and honestly, his case just seriously intrigues me. And with all the stuff going on with the whole Diddy thing and just realizing how dark and corrupt the music industry and the entertainment industry is as a whole, it just leads me to believe that there is something darker going on with this whole Eazy-E situation. Also, I want to know what you guys think, because some of you were actually around when all this was going on, and some of you have better perspective on the subject, so I always love hearing what you guys have to say, so drop it in the comments below. But likely all of you guys have heard of Eazy-E because he's just a legendary music icon. He's considered the Godfather of Gangster Rap, but I'm not sure if a lot of you guys know what happened to the Godfather of Gangster Rap, especially leading up to his final days. Now, Eric Lynn Wright was born not in 1963 like the original tombstone said, but he was born in 1964 on September 7th in Compton, which is a suburb of Los Angeles in California. Eric grew up during a time period where the pleasant suburbs of Compton had really kind of transformed after the Watts riots into more of an impoverished area, and it left a lot more crime. Just things started to go downhill fairly quickly to where this once pleasant, peaceful suburb was really more of an impoverished community than anything. Now, Eric's mom, Katie, was a grade school teacher, and his dad, Rich, was a postal worker. So despite popular belief that he grew up really poor and impoverished, they actually grew up fairly normal, and they made enough money to maintain their suburban lifestyle out in Compton. But the city of Compton was vibrant with gang activity. There was street dealers slanging this new substance called crickety crack. Unfortunately, the rates of homicide in the city were extremely high. And in an area like this, you can either find your role that you play in the streets, or you can end up finding the only role that's left for you to play, which is the role of a victim. And Eric, though he was small, was not going to be playing the role of a victim. He was known by so many of his friends and family as just being such a tough personality, and he was known by a lot of people as being pretty ruthless. Eric decided to drop out of high school in the 10th grade and figured he'd find his role in the streets. So he started mobbing around with his cousin, Big Horace, and was really starting to get involved in the dope game. Eric wasn't really a major player in the game at this point. He was mostly just a runner for his cousin Big Horace. That all changed one day, though, when Big Horace was suddenly taken out by some rival gang members, and that left some pretty big shoes to fill. But E was up to the challenge. And with E being number 2 in the operation, he was kind of the next in line to take over if he really wanted to. And he did. He wanted to make money, and he wanted to start to figure out how he could make his way into the rap game.
You know, it was his little cousin, and Big Horace was, he moved a little weight in the neighborhood, and he was this little runner. And when Horace passed, somebody kicked him, and pretty much E inherited the business. And we just hit it off from there, doing what we had to do in the streets. Oh, he was, man, he's just like Ruthless. He was about his money, about making money, marketing.
He was constantly working the streets, making connections, and what would be Eric's greatest strength is his easygoing demeanor, yet his refusal to be disrespected by anybody. As a dealer, he was kind of just ruthless because he was all about the money, and if you didn't have his money, then he was going to be coming for you. He was so focused on getting that bag that he befriended the Kelly Park, the South Side, and the neighborhood Crips, all so that he could just maintain good business relationships with them, because what's better than selling to one gang crew than selling to multiple of them? Make extra money. He was just cool with everybody, which is one of the reasons why people think he went with the name Eazy-E when he finally started to get into the rap game. After seeing what happened to his cousin Big Horace, he knew he had to play it cool with all these gang crews because, well, he didn't want to end up the same way. Now, it's said that during his time on the streets hustling, he was able to make over $250,000. This was the time period where crickety crack was kind of exploding onto the scene. In fact, I watched some interviews where they talk about how police officers really didn't even quite understand what it was at that point, and they wouldn't even get busted for it when they had it on them because cops just weren't even hip to what it was.
Crack at first hit, I mean, nobody knew what it was. I used to run for older cats, run powder. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know how to rock up no dope. I just knew people put up their nose. That's what they do. And somebody showed me, and they said, man, look what you can do with this. You can make this. And I was like, oh, okay. And 'cause I was young, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to rock up no dope. I just knew people put up their nose. That's what they do. And somebody showed me, and they said, man, look what you can do with this. And I was like, oh, okay. And from there on, just like New Jack City when G Money went to Nino and said, "This is new stuff." I was like, "What new stuff?" And they showed me how to do it. It took off. So we were pretty much the first on the block because, like Ease, when she say in his songs, you know, the cops, they didn't know. You know, I remember the first few times I got caught with big wads of crack in my pockets. Cops would hit you on the hand and say, "Don't do it no more," and get a DA reject. You never went to jail. You went to jail, but court never came around. So at the first, they didn't know the city. They didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen. All we knew, people were doing anything for it and spending and getting money any way they can to buy it.
And honestly, they didn't really either. They just knew that people were emptying their bank accounts to come back and buy more. So they figured, this is making money. Let's keep doing it. Little did they know the ramifications of selling this stuff. Hindsight's always 20/20, you guys. Now, even though E was a super successful dealer, he still wanted to get out of the game. He knew that this wasn't going to be a career path. He knew this wasn't going to be something that was going to last a long time. And especially after seeing what happened to his cousin, he knew that he couldn't take any chances. So he really wanted to make his way out of that game, and he wanted to get into the rap game. He knew that music was another place where he could make a lot of money. And Eric just had such incredible business acumen that he was always destined for something more than hustling on the streets. Now, at the same time, Eazy was hustling on the block. He was also working these small DJ gigs with the world-class Wrecking Crew, and they were more of like a DJ crew, pumping out more like electro pop jams during the time. Wasn't a whole lot of rapping or singing or anything like that. It was more him doing DJ stuff, actually learning how to spin tracks and mix and things like that. Now, at this time, hip-hop and rap music was not mainstream. In fact, it was all extremely underground. And the only place you could find any sort of mainstream rap or hip-hop music was all East Coast stuff with record labels like Def Jam and all these East Coast hip-hop artists that were popping up. The West Coast really didn't stake any claim in this hip-hop game, so it left a pretty big open void for Eazy and Dre and people like that to come through and start making a name for themselves. Now, while Eazy was coming up with his plans to get this record label built from the ground up, he was able to link up with some of the most amazing rappers during that time period. He was able to link up with Ice-T, Ice Cube, Yomo from Yomo and Malky, and probably the best connection that he made during that time period was Andre Young when he was working with the world-class Wrecking Crew. And you probably know him better as Dr. Dre. Now, some sources say that Dr. Dre was actually put in jail for failing to appear on some traffic violation ticket. This had been like the third time that it happened. And Alonzo Williams, who was the kind of lead DJ for World Class Wrecking Crew, was like, "I'm not bailing you out, man. Like, you can stay there. This is your own fault." It's said that Eazy-E offered to pay off his debt and to bail him out of jail as long as he agreed to produce his upcoming album and help him get this record label off the ground. Now, Dr. Dre was friends with some other local rappers in the scene, and one of the local rappers he thought would be a great fit to bring on with this record label was a guy by the name of O'Shea Jackson, better known as Ice Cube. Now, Eric already had some good connections in the music world. Like I said, he was working DJing with World Class Wrecking Crew, and Alonzo Williams, being the head DJ of that crew, was really impressed by what Eric was capable of and his vision for what he wanted to build for the future, kind of how he wanted to bring rap and hip-hop into the mainstream. So Eric actually offered Alonzo $750 just to get him a meeting with this major music executive, major manager at the time, and his name was Jerry Heller. Now, at the time, Jerry Heller was the manager for both the World Class Wrecking Crew and another group called CIA. And after a couple weeks of trying to push on Jerry, finally Alonzo was able to get a meeting set up with Eazy-E and Jerry Heller. And $750, according to Jerry Heller, doesn't get you much time. So it was kind of a quick exchange. And basically he came up and he said, "Here's your $750 to Alonzo." And Alonzo was kind of there just hanging out, facilitating the meeting. And Jerry Heller asked, "Yo, you got anything for me? Like, you got something to show me?" And I guess typically he's used to people just like kind of bullshitting him and being like, "Yeah, this is my guy." But then when they finally show up, they're really just not sure what to present. But when he asks him if he has anything to show him, Eazy just replies with, "Yeah." Eazy actually proceeded to play the song Boys in the Hood, which I'm sure nearly everybody who's watching this knows about. And Jerry Heller instantly fell in love and asked him even to replay the song. He loved it so much. He knew that this is exactly what he was looking for. He saw dollar signs in his eyes at that point and knew that he had to take the next step. Jerry says himself that this was some of the most important music to be played to him since rock music in the 1960s, which I think is a pretty big and bold statement for him to make as somebody who's been in the music industry as a manager and is successful as well. He was just really impressed with what he says is how clean Eazy was, and not only that, but just how professional and motivated he was with such amazing business aptitude. So the two of them began working on a deal, and he kind of just asked Eazy, like, what do you want? What are you looking for? And he says, I want to be 50-50 partners. Jerry's originally on board with this, but because of the style of music and just the time period where there wasn't a whole lot of black-owned companies or black-owned labels at the time, he figured it would be better for the label and better for publicity, essentially, if Eazy actually was the main owner of the company, but they still would split everything 50-50. At this point, Jerry essentially dropped $500,000 in Eazy's hands and basically said that what he was about to do was going to be changing the stereotypes and changing the music industry forever. Eazy got right to work recruiting some of the best talent so that he could start showcasing some of these amazing rappers on the West Coast. He brought on Dr. Dre, and he also brought on another major producer at the time who was very popular named Arabian Prince. This was the very beginning stages of Ruthless Records, and this was the very beginning stages of this future explosion of hip-hop and rap music onto the mainstream music scene. By November 6th, 1987, Ruthless actually released a debut compilation album titled NWA and the Posse, and it was just a big mixture of a bunch of songs from a second label at the time, but it did include 3 tracks from the new upcoming group NWA, and those tracks were Boys in the Hood, Dope Man, and Panic Zone. Now, it was released under Macola Records, and so the compilation just included some other hip-hop and rap artists from Macola Records, and then it also included some artists from the Ruthless Records label. The album itself didn't necessarily perform that well, but it did mark the beginning of a new supergroup called NWA, Neighborhood Gentlemen with Attitude. Later on that year, they would actually bring in MC Ren and DJ Yella to kind of add to this supergroup, and they would start working on their debut studio album. In 1988, they dropped the album Straight Outta Compton. Fun fact alert, Straight Outta Compton was actually one of the very first albums that included the parental advisory sticker that they had just recently concocted up, and it was a lot different than it is now. It looks a little bit different anyways. Likely it's because this is one of the first albums that ever featured what they would call realistic depictions of what it's like to live and grow up in an area where police brutality and urban tension was the norm. It also makes sense because the album itself was fairly taboo at the time, didn't get much airtime, and one of the main tracks that was featured on the album was called Fuck the Police. So, I mean, you can only imagine how that was received. Most radio stations weren't willing to just throw that on the radio from fear that they would ruin their own reputation. However, the media coverage truly made up for the lack of airtime because people were going out of their way to scoop this album up because they wanted to see what the hype was about. Because of that, the album actually eventually went double platinum and skyrocketed Ruthless Records and NWA into the spotlight pretty much overnight. People just loved the authentic realness of this music, and they felt like they could really relate to it because these guys were talking about things that happen in normal people's everyday lives. It was the West Coast's first attempt at trying to get their hip-hop and rap scene really started, and they were really able to start competing against the East Coast hip-hop scene now. And to show just how ruthless Eazy-E was, within 1 month after releasing that NWA album Straight Outta Compton, he released his own debut solo album titled Eazy Does It. What a beast. Apparently, the album was made up from all of the members of the group, but it featured Eazy-E's solo signature gangster rap style. This album was another double platinum success, yet again put Ruthless Records and Eazy-E and NWA on the map. Despite the instant success and multiple solid releases between 1987 and 1989, they would hit a speed bump when, unfortunately, Ice Cube would decide that he was going to leave the group. He felt like there was some shady business dealings going on coming from Jerry Heller, and he actually filed a lawsuit against Jerry Heller, which they eventually settled outside of court. But after this, Ice Cube decided he was going to leave the group and start his own solo career. NWA would continue on without their fifth member, and they would release their second studio album, which would feature this new style of production that Dr. Dre is kind of considered to be a pioneer of. It's called G-Funk, and it really features a lot of kind of mid-tempo synthesizer sounds, as opposed to the former upbeat, up-tempo hip-hop kind of ballad sounds that they had coming from the 70s into the early 80s. It was just a whole new style, a whole new vibe, and it actually dominated the hip hop and rap scene all throughout the 90s, on both the East and West Coast. NWA then goes on to produce their second studio album, E-Phil for Zaggin', which debuts at number 2 during its first week, but in its second week, it actually peaks at number 1 on the charts. So the group is still on fire. Arguably, this album was even better than the first one because Dr. Dre's new production style and just everything about it just went harder and just was more aggressive and even more in your face than it was before. Many fans would argue that this is some of Dr. Dre's best work, and especially because of how monumentally successful this new style was, it just marks a huge change in the rap game. It's really what put Dr. Dre on the map. Now, like the first one, this was another parental advisory album, because this one included the word zaggin' quite a bit, and it would also kind of talk a lot about very misogynistic ideologies. So you can imagine there was pretty mixed reactions to the release of this album. NWA has officially established themselves as an anti-establishment group, and they kind of paved the way for this whole rebellious movement that goes on in America during that time period. But honestly, you guys, Dr. Dre did slay those beats, because there's some really sick tracks on that album. I mean, one of my favorites is Appetite for Destruction. Just that track goes so hard, and the beats are just so melodic and chill, but like just kind of gangster. It just is, it's sick. However, NWA would experience its biggest and final blow and would feel a lot like deja vu when Dr. Dre started feeling the same way that Ice Cube felt, like Jerry was doing some sort of shady financial things with the group, and he was not going to take it. Simultaneously, most of you will probably also know about another label boss, and his name is Suge Knight, and he runs the notorious Death Row Records. But at the time, this was not really a record label yet. It was kind of in the beginning stages and kind of was starting to come up right around the same time as Ruthless Records was starting to fade out. But in an effort to try and compete with Ruthless Records and a lot of the East Coast rap groups, Death Row was really trying really hard to poach some of the artists that were on Ruthless Records, and were trying to poach other artists as well. In fact, they eventually offered Dr. Dre to break his contract with Ruthless Records. Suge Knight actually offered to bring Dr. Dre on as kind of like a co-founder of the label. Now, multiple members of Ruthless actually followed Dre, and they all went over to Death Row Records and signed over there. But there's a lot of speculation that this didn't really happen willingly. It's said that Eazy-E was actually threatened by Suge Knight, and because of that, he agreed to finally release them from the label, but he didn't release their publishing rights. So technically, he still owned all the rights to the music, which would get him royalties for the music. And I mean, shoot, like, I'd be pissed too. Dr. Dre's the one that made all the beats, and I mean, to be fair, Eazy's really only in part of that album. You know, he has a part in each song, but he's not making each beat for the whole album, and Dr. Dre is now not going to see anything for any of that music. That would kind of piss me off too. I think the thing that made Dr. Dre the most mad though was the fact that Eazy ended up siding with Jerry Heller on the whole situation. Instead of having his back as his boy, they've been friends for a while. They started this thing together. They've been making tons of money together. They've been working on beats and rhymes and stuff together. It just seemed like he would have taken Dre's side as opposed to Jerry Heller's side. Likely the reason for that is because Jerry agreed to take care of Eazy. He was going to keep making sure that he was taken care of financially, and maybe he was still kind of taking advantage of the other members. But because Jerry felt like he owed Eazy for bringing this whole opportunity to the table, he made sure that he took care of him the best he could, for a while anyway. But we'll bring this up again later, because eventually Eazy does start feeling like Heller starts taking and doing shady things with his finances. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Obviously, this presented a serious crisis for the Ruthless Records label. Their main act just disbanded. Eazy still had his solo career, but it wasn't nearly as popular as the NWA explosion. And not only that, but he felt like he had just been abandoned by all these guys that he literally just helped bring up into the industry. And then once they finally had made it and were able to break off, then they did. So I can imagine him feeling extremely abandoned and I would imagine that had to hurt quite a bit when Eazy was such a good guy to bring them up with him. Eazy continued his solo career for a couple years, but the whole gangster rap era started to fade. R&B started to become more and more popular, and the label was starting to get more desperate to find a new replacement for NWA that would start bringing some more money in. They finally found their comeback artist in late 1993 with Bone Thugs and Harmony, who brought that street gangster yet harmonious sound, and it kept the record label relevant with all of these emerging R&B labels like Jive and Bad Boy. Now, this wouldn't be an epic comeback, but it would be a good start for a label that seemed to be fading. And unfortunately, this comeback wouldn't really last that long for Eazy-E. On February 24th, 1995, Eazy would admit himself into the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles because he was experiencing a pretty intense cough and was starting to feel really sick. After doing some testing, it was discovered that he was actually infected with the AIDS HIV virus. The news came as a complete shock to the entire nation because people were trying to figure out, like, how did he get this disease? What happened? Everything just seemed to come on so suddenly. And at this time, the disease was fairly misunderstood and people really didn't know a whole lot about it. But this, for me, is where things got weird, you guys. Because after only 1 month, Eazy passed away from pneumonia due to complications from the virus. 1 month, you guys. I'm no medical expert, but I don't understand how he could show no symptoms and then out of nowhere within 1 month be gone. There is a huge faction of fans out there who don't believe the official story. They don't believe that this is truly what happened to him. Some of those people are actually his very own children. They believe it so seriously that they actually came out with a 4-part docuseries that is available on Hulu, and I would recommend it. And it goes over all the possible theories of what could have happened to their father, because they still don't have answers, at least not ones they're satisfied with, and me either. Even more strange is that within that 1 month period, he actually got married to his 4-year girlfriend. They had been dating for 4 years up till this point. She had 1 child with him, and she had a second one on the way. Second child wouldn't be born until 6 months after Eazy-E was already passed. Obviously, with him being in such a fragile state, being so close to the end, and being hospitalized, Eazy-E's son, Lil Eazy-E, actually files a lawsuit claiming that there's no way that he knowingly and coherently signed the marriage license and the subsequent will, which leaves his entire estate and his record company and everything all signed over to Tamika Woods Wright, who left her name hyphenated for some reason because Eric's last name wasn't good enough for her, I guess. Now, E had 11 kids. Yeah, you heard that right. Not as many as the 15 kids like we talked about last week with DMX, but pretty close. He had 11 kids. E was known to be an amazing father, and this was said by most all of the mothers that he had fathered children with. And I'm sure because of this, he wanted all of his kids to be well taken care of. He actually talked about this on numerous occasions with his homies, that he was doing all this to make sure his kids had a better life than he had growing up in the ghetto in the streets. Yet, Tamika claims that he only left $75,000 to each one of his kids out of a $20 million estate. So yeah, sure, 75 grand seems like a lot, but when you're expecting somewhere upwards of $1 million+, then that's kind of a slap in the face. And also, who are you? Who is this chick? Where'd she come from? Why is she even involved and running this now at all? Doesn't make any sense. Seems a little fishy. And the timing of everything, right before he passed away, a lot of people say that there is no possible way that he was coherent enough to actually sign those documents, and that there was some sort of foul play going on in order to coerce him into signing these documents. To bring us back full circle, Tamika is actually the one that put that awful, ridiculous tombstone for Eazy-E to rest under for 24 years. And she refused, despite numerous requests by multiple different family members, to do anything about it. She wouldn't change the tombstone, she wouldn't get a new one, and she just blatantly didn't seem to care at all. It wasn't until Eazy's daughter, Erica, decided that she was just going to bypass any sort of laws or legalities, and she was just going to take matters into her own hands. And that's when she designed this phenomenal tombstone to replace that one. Kind of in a secret ceremony, they went out and they replaced it, switched it out, and then they had a big celebration to come and unveil the new one and show the world this new tombstone that they had made for Eazy-E. And I think this one is way more fitting for somebody as monumentally iconic as Eazy-E, the Godfather of Gangster Rap. But like I said, you guys, something's just never sat right with me about all of this. It just didn't feel right at all. And there's a number of different theories as to what possibly could have happened to Eazy-E. His daughter Evie actually goes over 4 of them in that docuseries I was talking about on Hulu. So check that out. But there is a couple of theories that I really wanted to focus on. And one of the addictions that I haven't really touched on much on my channel so far is the addiction to money and power. If I'm being honest, that could probably be one of the most detrimental and dangerous addictions that there is. It's one of those addictions that kind of hides in plain sight. And it's not as dramatically obvious as someone struggling with a substance addiction, which completely derails their life. It almost seems like these people who are powerful and have lots of money are praised for being so powerful and having money, which makes them want it even more. It fuels this addiction even more. So it's another addiction I wanted to bring to the table, and it's something that I think is especially relevant with all of this Diddy stuff going on, because maintaining that power and that stature seems to be one of his main motivations for why he was the way he was. And I mean, it's not just Sean Combs. We see it with Epstein, with Jay-Z, Danny Masterson, politicians or presidential candidates. It's all over the place, and it seems to be infecting literally every facet of this wealthy elite network. And another such person who was extremely vocal about maintaining his power by any means necessary was Suge Knight. And Suge Knight actually happens to be one of the most popular suspects when it comes to what happened to Eazy-E. And this theory actually comes from an episode of Jimmy Kimmel, which features Suge Knight, who was freshly released from prison. He struts on stage with his big, boisterous attitude and his larger-than-life persona, smoking a big, fat, stinky cigar. He sits on Jimmy Kimmel's desk, just like larger than life, man. Backstreet Boys. And from there, he proceeds to say this.
Hey, the thing about all this, right? It's real simple. You know, man, I love your show. I like what you're doing. Really.
Thank you.
Right? That's why
Thank
I
God.
came here. Fresh out of jail, I'll come check you out, right?
Right.
Why the bulletproof vest?
Oh, it's not. Oh, no, that's just. It's
you
the
know,
new style. You've been in the can for a while. This is what everybody. That's what all the talk show hosts are wearing.
This is a new thing, right?
Yeah.
See, if somebody gonna do something about it, see,
Right.
technology is so high, right?
Right.
So if you shoot somebody, you go to jail forever. So the kids, you don't want to go to jail forever, right? So
Right.
they got this new thing out there. People sell them all the time. They got this stuff to call. They get blood from somebody with AIDS.
Yeah.
And then they shoot you with it.
Oh,
so
well, that
that's
seems
don't happen.
bad.
That's
Yeah.
a slow death.
Yeah. Yeah.
The easy thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Okay. Way to lighten the mood.
Wow. Well, Suge's terror alert level just went from elevated to high.
Of course, everybody, including Jimmy Kimmel, are like, WTF, bro? Did you really just say that? Especially because he had such notorious beef after Dr. Dre left Ruthless Records to go over to his record label. It seemed to be either very insensitive or very incriminating to a lot of people. Now, of course, there's been interviews since where Suge Knight claims that he was only saying this because he also believes that there was something nefarious that had happened to Eazy. He doesn't accept the official story of what happened, and so he was just saying that that's a possibility of what could have happened to him, and he thinks that somebody was responsible, but he says that it wasn't him. As wild as this claim might seem, it does have some major credibility because, well, none of Eazy-E's partners, which there were many, ever had or came out to say that they were infected with the virus, that they transmitted the virus to him. None of his kids had the virus. Nobody ever came out saying, this is how he got the virus. Still, to this day, nobody knows exactly how he got the virus. So the fact that he didn't get it from a partner of any kind, maybe he was injected with it. And that's what's leading people to think that maybe Suge Knight did inject him with this syringe that had some tainted blood, and that's what actually caused him to die from this disease. And when you consider the fact that Suge Knight is currently sitting in prison for a 28-year prison sentence, I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibilities. But like I said, Suge claims he didn't do it. He says it wasn't him. And I mean, would he really admit that he did? Probably not. But there's never been any substantial definitive proof, and there really doesn't seem to be any motive because at that point in time, he'd already taken out Ruthless Records and he'd already kind of destroyed Eazy-E's career by taking his secret weapon, Dr. Dre. So it just seemed like he really didn't have any motive to take out Eazy-E at the time. There was really no competition going on. In fact, the competition was really more between Diddy and Suge Knight during that time period. One thing I did think about, though, was bringing on Bone Thugs and Harmony did place Ruthless Records more in the R&B zone and it was starting to compete with record companies like Bad Boy Records. So it made me wonder if maybe there was some beef that kind of started there, because Eazy had really developed this gangster rap style, and now it was starting to fade into this R&B style, and it could have been seen as stepping on Diddy's toes. And we know what happens when people step on Diddy's toes. They end up in a bathtub, and they usually end up with pneumonia. And just a few years later, Sean Combs is actually suspected of having something to do with the passings of Pac and Biggie. So it just makes you wonder, was he another instance of Diddy's competition that had to get taken out to make way for Bad Boy? But knowing what we know now about what Diddy's willing to do to get Bad Boy Records to the top, it just makes you wonder, did he make some sort of agreement with Suge Knight? And maybe they decided to take out the competition completely so that it would open up the playing field for Bad Boy Records and Death Row to take over. You know what they say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So maybe Diddy and Suge, though enemies, had a common enemy. So I don't know, you guys. It definitely is an interesting theory for sure. Another similar theory about how he possibly contracted this virus circles around Jerry Heller. He actually had sent Eazy-E to an acupuncturist after he had gotten into like a four-wheeler accident, and he was just looking to get some help with some of the issues he was having. And Jerry offered to send him to an acupuncturist, which I'm not really sure how that necessarily helps, but maybe he just had some sore muscles or some tightness. I'm not sure. This wasn't a normal acupuncturist. This was not a regular stop for E, and this was something that was recommended from Jerry Heller for him to go do. The rapper Frost truly believes with all of his heart that Jerry set him up with this acupuncturist to get infected with the virus from tainted acupuncture needles.
Well, you gotta even think of that tragedy. No girl has ever came forward saying that they got the AIDS virus from Eazy or taint thing. I'm gonna tell you what happened with Eazy getting AIDS, and I believe this to this day. And I don't care if you guys got it on film. You could tell the world. They gave him tainted needles with acupuncture needles that tainted him and gave it to him because he got hurt in Honda Valley on quad runners, and he was riding quads. And what happened is that someone, I won't say the name, but people know the name. I don't want to say that name because it's a devil's name. But, you know, another person in rap, if you know your history of rap, calls him a devil. So if you know your history in rap or West Coast rap, you'll know who I'm saying. But I was told even in the last conversation from Eazy not to even talk to that man. And not only that, but I think that they really had a stronghold of giving him tainted needles with the AIDS virus in them through acupuncture. Because how else could somebody die that fast to AIDS? Have you even heard of somebody dying in 2 weeks of AIDS, bro? Come on, man. This is just unheard of, bro. It was like, I'm in the hospital. I contracted the AIDS virus. 2 weeks later, March 26th or whatever, I fall out and I die. You know what I mean?
During the last few months of Eazy's life, he seemed to have realized that Jerry actually was being shady with their finances, and he was doing things to kind of screw over Eazy and the other members of Ruthless Records. And because of this, he told everybody with Ruthless Records to avoid Jerry, don't talk to him, basically just get that guy out of your life. If you take this into consideration, it seems like Jerry had quite a bit of motive to take out Eazy-E. Otherwise, his fortune was gone. Members of Bone Thugs and Harmony also mimic this sentiment portrayed by Frost, that Jerry Heller had something to do with it. It just makes you wonder what extremes these music executives will go to maintain their wealth and power. And if you go back and look at my other stories, it's yet another case of an artist or celebrity who's passed away from complications with pneumonia. And some people think that him being injected with this virus could have just been a cover-up, because as long as he showed that he was infected with the virus, then people wouldn't question what actually happened to take him out so fast. They would just accept the official report and accept the official story as truth. So there's a lot of speculation, since nobody's able to figure out how he actually contracted the virus. Maybe it was something that was given to him after the fact, and he was actually taken out another way. I mean, if he turns up positive for pneumonia and he also turns up positive for the virus, then boom, it makes sense. No further questions are going to be asked. But if he's passed away under some suspicious circumstances and people can't quite figure out what happened, then it just leaves more questions, and they didn't want that, I'm sure. According to the internet, the typical amount of time for someone in 1995 to live once diagnosed with AIDS or HIV was roughly about 3 years. So how on earth did Eazy-E pass after only 1 month? Everyone around him said that he was asymptomatic, he didn't lose any weight, he didn't exhibit any signs or symptoms up until he started to have that really bad cough and finally admitted himself into the hospital. And if you take into consideration that the whole Magic Johnson situation was going on around this time, and there was tons of research being done, a lot of progress was being made in science to actually fight and combat this disease. So it just makes you wonder, how could we have so much information and so much assistance available, and yet Eazy was so far past being helped? Something just doesn't add up. I have always felt truly uneasy about Tamika Woods Wright, because even though they were dating for 4 years and shared 2 children together, there's just something about that whole situation that is giving hardcore gold digger and amazingly narcissistic vibes. I mean, it's her and her 2 kids over his other 9 children and other 9 baby mamas. It just doesn't seem fair. And even though I was feeling uneasy about the whole thing, the piece that solidified it for me was that tombstone. You don't leave a tombstone like that for someone who you claim to love, honor, cherish, and respect, especially when that person is such an amazingly monumental, iconic figure in American history. If she truly loved Eazy-E like she says she did, then she would have never left that tombstone over his grave. Nor would she have taken that record company and then run it into the ground over the next few years. She would have likely hired somebody who could manage the business better and paid them while she still sits on as like an executive or some sort of owner or founder. But no, she thought she could do it, and she decided to try and take on more than she could chew, and the company eventually just ran itself into the ground. I have also never really felt that good about Jerry Heller. Both Ice Cube and Dr. Dre left the group because they felt like he was doing shady things with their money. And then eventually Eazy-E also said the same thing. He also told everybody to stay away from Jerry Heller. He was a bad guy. It just makes you wonder, what was he doing that might have led him to make some interesting decisions and try and take out Eazy and keep himself from being discovered. I just feel like Jerry was extremely money hungry and was not transparent, and he had been in this business. He knew that he could probably get away with taking advantage of these new, young, inexperienced artists. It doesn't seem that far-fetched to me that he might have had something to do with it. It definitely made me think that maybe Jerry had gotten to Tamika. Maybe he was worried that if Eazy passed away and he didn't have his will and everything in order, that it would actually leave everything up to all of his different kids and all of the different mothers, and that could have incited a whole bunch of legal issues and a lot of legal drama over trying to figure out who is entitled to what. It makes so much more sense for him to have somebody who he's working with, who's not going to fight or argue with him, who's going to continue the business with him, who's going to continue to try and make him money, and kind of plant the idea in her head that she needs to do something before it's too late and he's gone. But I truly believe that Jerry Heller had something to lose, if he hadn't already lost it, like so many people claim that he did. And the possibility that he had E taken out, and then he had Tamika marry him just 12 days before he passed, barely conscious and able to sign his marriage license or the will, and by an officiant who was probably paid to recount the situation just as Jerry wanted him to. I mean, nobody even knew who this guy was, and no family was allowed to be present because it was held at a private ceremony in the hospital. Come on, you guys. You can't tell me there's not something shady about that. Come on. And even more than that, people really didn't know a whole lot about HIV or AIDS during this time period, so it makes sense that they might use that as a possible means to someone's end, because people don't really know what's going on with it, and people would just accept it as, oh no, like we just don't know anything about this virus right now. I guess that's a possibility. It just minimizes the amount of questions that people are going to ask. However, there's a good possibility that he wasn't even coughing or feeling sick from this virus. Like we've talked about in my previous episodes with Brittany Murphy, Kim Porter, Aaron Carter, even with things like what happened to Jamie Foxx and I'll Be Sure. These were all very similar occurrences, and they all had the exact same symptoms leading up to their untimely passing. And we've already talked about the possible use of cyanide, arsenic, and ricin to be able to mimic these symptoms and be untraceable when they're actually, doing an autopsy. Also, take into consideration that all of those cases I just mentioned happened after Eazy-E. So this would have been one of the more early cases where they were trying to silence somebody, and maybe they just really wanted to make extra dang sure that nobody suspected anything. And one of the most popular things that was happening during that time period for health issues was this virus. So it makes a lot of sense why they might go this route as opposed to another route. Regardless, E was not shy about the situation. In fact, he kind of became the new face of the disease, because with so much being unknown about everything, and him having contracted it through same-sex relations. It just brought more understanding and more awareness to the topic of HIV and AIDS, and it allowed people to understand it a little bit better and protect themselves a little bit better as well.
Rapper Biggie Smalls and promoter Puffy Combs had this to say about the man.
When he died, it really opened up a lot of people's eyes, like this is affecting us. It's not a black thing, not a white thing, not a gay thing.
I think if people weren't, people that were, going from city to city, messing with these groupies, after the parties, after the concerts, the shows, if they wasn't wearing condoms before, hopefully, God bless them, it won't be too late. I know for sure they'll be wearing condoms now.
Clap your hands for EAZY E. Clap your hands for EAZY E. Clap your hands for everybody we lost.
Easy did have a number of different partners, so it's possible he did contract it from one of his many partners and just nobody ever came forward out of fear or shame, whatever the case is. It's just possible that the person who actually infected E maybe didn't come forward. However, to this day, there is still no proof of anybody or anything giving or causing him to have this virus, which ended up taking his life. But I want to know what you guys think, because inevitably you always know something that I didn't, and you always have some really valid and interesting perspective to share. So do that in the comments below. I would really appreciate it. We all appreciate it. If you don't already subscribe to the channel, what are you doing? Subscribe already. And if you need more sobering stories, I'll go ahead and include a whole playlist right here that has every single one of them that I've ever done, all of them. And then I've got one right here that's going to go ahead and include all of my Diddy videos. And then YouTube thinks that it knows you better than you know yourself. So check out this video right here because, well, it's probably right. You'll probably like it. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Check out that Sunnyside link. Start your free trial today. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you guys next week for another one. But until then, later, sobers.
Wish we were there, breaking all the rules, when niggas try to play fair. Ain't nothing fair in this game of life. You gotta get yours before you lose your life. The game is designed for them to win. You think I'm lying? Visit the pen. They already got a number reserved for your ass. Don't be a fool and join their class. They want you to enroll in their institution so they can pimp you with their new form of prostitution. Wake up, my niggas, and hear you clear. Don't be a slave to this game called fear. You got a mind, you gotta use it.